In this tutorial, we are going to look at the Cinedeck Project Manager used in version 4.5 of the Cinedeck user interface. If you'd like to better understand project management from an earlier version, this tutorial will not be very helpful. On the website, have a look at the Cinedeck Project Naming tutorial instead. To confirm the version of your system, click on Setup at the lower right of any preview window, and then, at the top, select Prefs. The version is shown at the bottom of the Prefs page. Cinedeck recorders allow an extremely flexible file structure, meaning the folders where you record your content and the file names used for each clip. I am using an RX3G for this tutorial, but all Cinedeck systems have virtually identical settings for projects and file naming. Really, the only practical differences are the formats and the number of channels available on a particular system. Before we get rolling, even if you are using a touchscreen system, it can be very useful to connect a USB keyboard and a mouse for entering data and controlling the deck. When you have them connected, press Ctrl+K to show a list of keyboard shortcuts. Note that Escape can often be used to cancel changes and return to the previous screen, while Enter can often be pressed to save the changes, close the current screen, and return to the previous screen. Okay, back to project management. For new as well as long-time Cinedeck users, the most important thing to understand about project management in version 4.5 is that the interface and operation is extremely project-centric. Operationally, this means you first create a project and you then assign one or more channels to that project. Going forward from there, most of the settings you make will be global across all of the channels associated to the project. With this in mind, multiple channels that require the same settings would normally be assigned to a single project, while channels requiring unique settings would be associated to their own independent projects. There is one caveat to this. If one or more of the channels associated to your project is recording, the only change you can make to other channels is drive selection. So, if for example you are working on a multi-channel project where you may need some flexibility, it can be useful to assign a few channels to independent projects using the same settings as your primary project. One easy way to do this is to save the primary project a few times with new names and then assign those new projects to single channels as needed. This will give you the freedom to manipulate those channels independently. When multiple channels are assigned to one project, many of the changes you might make, such as codec choice, are saved and reflected across all channels. Additionally, switching between projects switches settings for the associated channels. This is quite different when compared to previous Cinedeck versions, where switching between projects only changed folder and file naming. This new system speeds and simplifies project setup and operation, but take note that not all settings are global across a project and not all settings are recalled as part of a project. Specifically, because drive letters can change depending on the resources available when Windows starts, previously set destination drives will not necessarily be selected when loading a project, so they must be confirmed. Audio inputs are saved as part of a project, however they are not global across the project, meaning, for example, if you have a 2-channel project and set the first channel's master encode for 8 SDI audio inputs, that does not change audio for the proxy or other channels. This is because different productions have different requirements and different wrappers have different limitations. So, audio input and routing selection for each encode is set independently. To help speed setup for situations where audio and/or destination drive selections will be identical across channels, there are methods for copying settings between channels, which we will look at shortly. Because of this new project-oriented behavior, the first page you enter when pressing Setup is the Overview page. It should be noted that there are many settings stored within a project. Project Manager, where we are going shortly, only deals with settings directly related to folder and file naming. The rest of the settings are managed on the various setup pages, accessed by these tabs across the top of the screen. There are a few things you should know before jumping into project management. First, let's briefly look at how folders and file names are generated. The default folder structure and file names are created by the system concatenating, or interconnecting, multiple variables, or wildcards, together. There is a broad range of wildcards that can be used, such as the project name, take number, and time and date information. Two commonly used wildcards are input name and encoder name. These can be used in naming and are also shown on the Setup tabs to identify system channels. This is the overview page for Input 1, but Input 1 is not necessarily a good description for your video source. Perhaps this channel is connected to a VTR. Let's change the name so you can see how the information is reflected in the system. Clicking the Input 1 name at the lower left opens an on-screen keyboard. Let's clear this field and type in a new name, VTR 06. Click Save and Close. VTR6 is now displayed at the top in the Setup tabs, and if we select another channel by clicking its thumbnail, the input name at the top changes. We are delving a bit into Setup, but on our VTR6 master encode page, we can set the desired codec, wrapper, and so on. Let's select ProRes HQ. Currently, this channel is using the default encoder name, master. We can instead use a more specific encoder name. At the bottom, click Encoder Name. Perhaps we should rename it PRHQ to represent our ProRes selection. Save and close. And at the top, we see the name has changed to VTR6 ProRes HQ. We could also change the VTR6 proxy encoder name, but let's leave that as the default. Remembering that the input and encoder name wildcards can also be used in file naming, let's go back to the overview page. To access Project Management, click the project name to the right of where it says Current Project. Let's take a quick look at the second tab, Path and File Name Templates. Here we can see the folders that would be created are 1 for the project name, with a subfolder using VTR6, the input name, with a subfolder ProRes HQ, the encoder name. The file name is using the same wildcards plus an incrementing take number, giving us 1, VTR6, ProRes HQ, take 1. Okay, back to the first tab, Project Manager, to step through the complete process. All channels must be assigned to a project. If no additional projects have been set up for a system, the default is that all channels are assigned to a project named 1. When a channel is assigned to a project, its thumbnail is highlighted orange. As we have seen, like the setup screens, Project Manager is made up of multiple pages with tabs across the top. Starting at the top left of the main project management page is the project name list. For practical purposes, you could have an unlimited number of saved projects, but on this system, only the default number 1 project is available. At the bottom left are two buttons, Manage Projects and Project Metadata. You could use the keyboard shortcuts here, but I will click Manage Projects and select New to create a new project. Using the on-screen or USB keyboard, type a name for your project. Keep it reasonably short and select Save and Close. Now we have two projects. While observing the channel thumbnails and remembering that orange means assigned, if we select between the two projects, we can see that no channels are assigned to the new project. Select the new project and click the thumbnails for one or more channels and press Apply to assign them to the selected project. If you don't need to make more naming changes, you could instead directly press Save and Close to save the assignments and return to the general setup pages. Let's save and close anyway to fully save the project. Here on the channel overview, we see XYZ is now the active project. Back into Project Manager for more detail. Shifting gears for a moment, it's useful to point out that many of the background files, like projects, are simply XML files. Besides creating new projects, Manage Projects has several other functions. You can rename the highlighted project. Save As creates a new project with a new name with all of the settings from the highlighted project. Remember earlier when I mentioned saving your primary project with a new name? This is where you do that. Export and import allow saving and retrieving projects to and from any connected drive. You can also delete the highlighted project. Note, however, that if the Cinedeck knows there is media on a connected drive associated to a project, you cannot delete that project. Looking at Windows Explorer, we can see that projects are found in the C Cinedeck Program folder and are divided into several subfolders. These folders are named after the various Cinedeck user interface modes. Most users are working in standard or normal YUV, HD, or SD. So, for this tutorial, we are working with projects saved in the normal folder. You can perform project file management tasks like copy and paste at the Windows level, but projects managed this way cannot be directly opened. You will need to import them. Before we go further, let's review in more detail how folders and file names are normally generated. First, folder and file naming on your Cinedeck is virtually unrestricted. You can name your content however you prefer, and almost anything goes, except you cannot use special system characters such as the asterisk. That said, for Cinedeck purposes, the Windows operating system does restrict the length of the total folder path, plus file name, plus file extension, to a maximum of 255 characters after the drive letter. For example, you could have the drive letter X, and then a total of 251 folder and file name characters, plus 3 additional file extension characters. However, it is really better to stay well under that maximum, as extremely long names can become quite unwieldy. So the bottom line? Abbreviations and careful use of uppercase letters will help create useful, readable names using a minimum of space. And speaking of space, or spaces, it is highly recommended to not use spaces in any file or folder name because different applications and operating systems treat spaces differently. To assist in this, there is a setting on the Preferences page which can tell the Cinedeck to replace a space, when typed, with an underscore. Allow spaces in file/folder names. Orange is on, aqua is off. With this setting turned off, spaces will be replaced with an underscore. Also note this setting, use on-screen keyboard. It will come up again shortly. Back to Project Manager. Project Metadata, the other button on the project management screen, includes director, producer, etc. This data is saved in the project XML, but is not currently really utilized further. For the curious, these are related to enhancements in upcoming releases. As we have seen, some wildcards can be customized to meet your specific needs. Earlier, we changed the input name from the channel overview page. You can also change the input name from the thumbnail here in Project Manager. For this new project, let's name this channel CAM01 for camera number 1. Save and close. You could, in fact, change both the input name as well as the input label, as they are separate wildcards. Let's return to Path and File Name templates. The area at the left displays the currently selected project name, the selected scene, and subscene. Scenes are additional wildcards, which we will discuss shortly. At the bottom, the Lock Project button allows you to prevent changes to a project. Only destination drives can be changed when a project is locked. To unlock a project, select Unlock and slide the button fully to the right. To the right of the Lock button is the assignment display, which shows the project, scene, and subscene. The channels assigned to this project are shown highlighted, while channels assigned to other projects are dim. The upper right area contains all of the naming details. The first row, all encoders use same templates, may already be clear to you, but we will come back to it in a moment. Below that, the left column displays the various names as they will be created based on the wildcard templates shown on the right. Cinedecks can write redundant files to different drives. The first 2 naming sections are the folder structure for the primary and secondary, or redundant, destination paths. As we discussed, the system can create your folder structure and file names by concatenating multiple wildcards together. By default, the paths here use the same wildcard template: project, input, and encoder, with backslashes between. This creates the main XYZ project folder, with a subfolder based on the new CAM1 input name, with a subfolder, master, where media clips will be written. With all encoders use same templates turned on, and because of the encoder wildcard, our proxy files will be written to a proxy folder at the same level as the master folder. This gives you the main XYZ project folder, with the Camera 1 subfolder, and 2 encoder-named subfolders, master and proxy. The file name comes next, and the tape or reel ID below that. Remember, many wildcards like the incrementing take number automatically update to reflect current data. These include multiple date and time options and the starting timecode. When a file is created, the wildcards are updated to the current value and that data is placed in the name. The default file name is built up using 4 wildcards: project name, input name, encoder name, and the incrementing take number. Added between the wildcards are a few underscore characters to make it more readable. This currently all adds up to give you XYZ underscore camera1 underscore master underscore take 1. With this all in mind, you might want a file name which says XYZ network Johann Sebastian Bach interview camera 1 master take 3. Let's shrink that down to XYZ JS Bach interview camera 1 master and the take number. To more clearly show how this naming process works, let's edit the file name template. Clicking the template field opens the editor. The name we want to create is XYZ JS Bach interview camera 1 master take number. There are several ways to build names. As we can see, some of the elements are already here, including camera 1, the new name we gave to the input wildcard. In the simplest scenario, we could just type the whole name, or just type the extra content in the right place between the wildcards. The changes will show in the expansion field and be used for naming our files. JS Bach space interview. Note the underscore, which is inserted instead of the space, because I have allow spaces in file names turned off in prefs. You can also copy and paste. So for example, you might have a document open in the background with various name elements. Copy what you need, switch back to Project Manager, and paste into the name. But to fully leverage the naming capabilities, you should use the wildcards. So let's remove these changes and add some wildcards to our name template. Let's select scene underscore subscene underscore. As we add wildcards, their content shows up in the expansion, but clearly the name is not quite right. Let's save this and move on to the next tab, the scenes list. Lists allow us to pre-build name elements for later use. By default, Scene 1 is the only item in this list, but that does not help us much. You can add new list items using the keyboard shortcut, via New in the Manage menu, and lists can be exported and imported. Lists for import can be previously exported CSL files, Cinedeck generated XML files with the CSL extension, and you can create lists using an external application. I used Notepad. Each list item needs to be on its own line. You should not use system or illegal file name characters, and the file should be saved as simple ASCII text with the TXT file extension. So, let's switch back to Scenes and import that list. Select Manage and Import. If needed, at the left you can select a different source drive or folder. Select the desired file and press Load File and Close. One important note about lists is that when you import a list, it will replace any items already in the list. And as you may have noticed, Scene 1 has been replaced. We have a list of scenes now, so let's move to subscenes. In this case, I will manually add items to the list. Select New from the Manage menu and type a name. EXT, an abbreviation for exterior, and select Save and Close. Let's add a few more, using the shortcut keys this time. Ctrl+N to create a new item, INT, and Enter to save it. Ctrl+N, B-roll, Enter, and let's rename the original subscene. Manage, Rename, INTV, and Enter to save it. So we have interview, exterior, interior, and B-roll for general shots. As noted earlier, lists exported from the Project Manager are saved as XML files with the CSL file extension. Let's export this list so it could be imported into other projects later. Manage and Export opens the File Manager screen. Select the file name field to activate the on-screen keyboard. Enter a new name and select Save and Close to return to the File Manager screen. The destination is highlighted at the left. If needed, you can select a different drive or folder from the list. Once the destination is chosen, press Save and Close to save the file. Up top in the Project Manager tabs, there are 3 additional lists. user list 1, 2, and 3. Items can be added to the user lists the same way as with scenes and subscenes, and you can have as many items in the lists as you need. Okay, let's go back to path and file name templates, and we can see that our file name is looking good. For new projects, the default incrementing take number starts at 001. If you click the field to the right, you can manually set the take to start at a different number. Start roll number can also be changed in the same way. Start roll is used in scene metadata, and, like project metadata, its use will be enhanced in later releases. Edit User Wildcards allows you to create and name 6 of your own project-based wildcards. These wildcards are only available within the current project and might be used for a show ID, staff names, etc. Let's use project number for the title and put in some content. Show Wildcards opens a listing of the current wildcards. This is not terribly important in the mode we are in now, but remember that setting in Prefs, Use On-Screen Keyboard? Turning that off allows direct editing of the naming templates on these screens, bypassing the on-screen keyboard. In that mode, it's a handy reference. Reset to defaults is just that. If you have made changes to the path, file name, or tape ID templates, pressing Reset will replace those templates with the defaults we saw when we started. The far right tab accesses a page of global wildcards. These work in the same way as project-based wildcards, but are available to all projects. For a title, let's use Facility, and for the content in this wildcard, let's use NYC. Cinedeck's main office is in New York City. Let's drop back into the file naming template and add the facility ID. Select the template to open the editor. Place the cursor in the desired position. It could go anywhere, but let's put it just after the project name. I will add an underscore and select Facility ID. Looking at the Wildcards keyboard, the project number wildcard we set earlier is also available. Okay, the name template is in good shape. Save and close. A bit more about all encoders use same templates. This means the same wildcard templates used for the master path and file names are used for the proxy path and file names. In some situations, this may not be desirable. For example, perhaps we need different names for the proxy files, or they need to be written to a different location so they can be accessed by an asset management system. In cases like that, we could turn all encoders use same templates off and set independent structures for the proxy folders and, if needed, proxy file names. But for this tutorial, we will leave it on. That's the project manager, but there are a few other things we should take a look at. Let's save and close to get back to the channel overview and the main setup pages. The name of the channel is Camera 1, reflecting the name we set earlier. On the Camera 1 input page, at the bottom left, let's activate Auto Detect so our channel can find valid input settings, and we will take SDI audio to go with the video. On the Master Encode page, codec and wrapper choices are set, and audio channel and routing selections can be made, and we could again set a different encoder name for this new project. But we want to look at two other things here: copying settings between channels and project path override, which is related to drive selection. In most situations, you will simply choose a destination drive for the selected encode, in this case, the Camera 1 master. When recording to a selected drive like this, the path settings we set in Project Manager will build the folder structure used to contain the media files. Project Path Override allows the direct manual selection of a drive and folder destination, providing encoder-specific file destination control. Project Path Override is used when the file destination already has the necessary folders, which might be the case, for example, when recording directly to a server. After you click Project Path Override, you select a destination drive, navigate through the various folders, and select an appropriate recording location. And the encode screen now indicates Project Path Override is active. Project Path Override is available for each file write, so you can also select a custom destination for the secondary or redundant master clip, and, of course, all master and proxy codec pages have primary and secondary drive selections and Project Path Override. I'm going to finish setting up for recording. Earlier, I mentioned that to speed setup, it is also possible to copy channel-specific settings between channels. Once you have completed setup, including destination drives and audio, at the lower right, select Copy to Other Channels. At the top of this menu, select which channels should receive the new settings. RX3G only has 2 channels, so there is just one destination. On a deck with more channels, you would select each channel that needs to receive the new settings. On the next line, you could select All to push all settings, or manually select specific settings by highlighting them orange. Audio routing includes the number of channels and routing, and remember, only same settings can be pushed and only to the same encoder. For example, AAS source to AAS destination, master to master, proxy to proxy. This means if you have 8 AAS audio channels set on your source, and SDI audio selected on the input of the destination channel, no changes will be made, and master audio selections will not be copied to a proxy encoder. Selecting disk assignments will make the destination drive the same for all selected channels. Select the other settings, such as burn-in preferences, as needed. Now that our project is set up, we can record some content and look at the result. Our XYZ project is recording master and proxy files to the specified destinations with our custom file naming. Let's switch to single-channel view to provide a bit more screen space. This being the first clip, the take number is 001. This is important. Let me record a few additional clips while we go over it. When setting up your file naming, it is highly recommended to always include a wildcard that will force each new file to have a unique name. In this case, we are using the take number, which is the easiest to use, but depending on your project, you might use the starting timecode, or perhaps some combination of date and time elements. If you do not create unique names, you run the risk of trying to create a new file with the same name as an existing file. The system will not allow duplicate names and prevents recording. This is not convenient during a production, so be sure to use an automatically incrementing wildcard. Okay, too bad we don't actually have a Bach interview, but we have a few JS Bach interview clips. Let's change to another name. Remember those keyboard shortcuts? To change the scene name, simply press N. N moves to the next scene list item. Mick Jagger, B.B. King, Ludwig van Beethoven, Bob Dylan, and P moves to the previous scene list item. Beethoven is what we need, and let's record. Stop. And let's record another clip, so we will have multiple clips to look at in their respective folders. Let's stop this recording. Press N for the next scene. Next. Mozart is the next interview we are doing. And record. Remember, stopping a recording requires a long press. Okay, we have a few clips. Let's move over again to Windows Explorer and look at the results. We were recording on the E drive. XYZ is our project. Inside XYZ is the Camera 1 folder, and in the Camera 1 folder are the master and proxy folders. Open the master folder, and the files are all clearly named. Now, let's look at the same folders and files from within the Cinedeck Clip Manager. Clicking play at the lower left on our recently used channel opens the last recorded clip for playback. Click Open, and we are in Clip Manager. On the left is the disk selector, where the E drive is highlighted. Note the icon that indicates that our E drive is L1, which is the top drive installed in the left drive sled. To the right of the drives are the master and proxy folders with our clips. Click another to view its contents. Hover over a clip with the mouse to see the full file name. Clip Manager also has a list view, thumbs view toggle button. Thumbs shows the first frame and timecode for each clip. List view shows additional clip details, date and time, codec specifics, and so on. At the top right is a column scroll control, which can be used to bring more details into view. When there are a large number of drives, these arrows can be used to scroll the list, and the same up-down arrows are available for the folder columns. From Clip Manager, you can select one or more clips to play, delete, and so on. But Clip Manager is a different tutorial. This is the end of the Project Manager tutorial. Click Back and again Back to get to the main screen. I hope this information is helpful and that you will watch out for more of these tutorial sessions. Cinedeck, your workflow, your way.